I'm Rob,
And I'm Mike.
and welcome to another edition of Let's Get Ethical.
All right. Welcome back in, everybody, to another edition of Let's Get Ethical
Welcome
with
back. Welcome back.
myself and Rob. How are you doing, Rob?
I'm excellent, Mike. How are you on this beautiful day?
It is a good day. It is a nice
It is a
day.
good day. Yes,
It
it
is a nice
is.
day. Let me point out to everybody my new sign. Um,
Ooh,
and
don't you
yeah,
love it? I love that new sign. I love it.
and Rob, if you'll point up with your left hand, there's our new logo.
Ding,
So
ding.
some changes happening at Let's Get Ethical. We're working on stuff. So we Rob and I were talking, and we talk about ethics. This
Mhm.
is Let's Get Ethical. We talk about ethics all the time, and we were having a conversation, and the conversation, the question came up, just where does all this stuff come from?
It did.
And so I posed the question to you, Rob, because Rob is the history buff. Rob's our guy. Um, so
I do love me some history.
Absolutely. Well, and I love that you love history. That way I can just hear it from you and I can ask questions and not have to worry about it. And so that's what we're going to do today. We're going to kind of explore the history of ethics because we talk about words like beneficence, non-maleficence, autonomy, justice, role duty,
Mm,
malfeasance, uh, uh, formalism, consequentialism. But Rob, correct me if I'm
mouthful.
wrong, most of these terms are fairly recent terms in the last
They
100 years, maybe even
Actually,
less.
yes. So actually less. If you think
Yeah.
about the four pillar construct, it's actually 20th century. So it's still
So
very new.
yeah, so if that's new, but then we talk about people like Immanuel Kant and Hippocrates,
Mm.
and so ethics has been around for a lot longer. So the question is really that I have is, before the ethics as we know it today, where did ethics come from?
Ah, that is a great question, right? So where does the idea of ethics it's thousands of years old. Like it's crazy to think how far back the early foundations of what we now call medical ethics started. And ethics has its root in a combination of it's societal norms, right? It's cultural values, it's philosophical inquiry, it's individual experiences, and it evolves over time, and it guides moral behavior and decision making. And that probably sounds a lot like when you and I talk about ethics,
Mhm.
right? And some of the things we talk about on Let's Get Ethical. So it has its roots really in early civilization, and where early moral codes were really established to maintain what we call the social order, and it was used to resolve conflict. So, for instance, the very first kind of code was the Code of Hammurabi, which actually dates back to 1754 BCE. That's a long time ago. That's thousands of years ago. And
A
it's one
little
of the
bit.
early, it's just a little bit, it's a little older than you and I. It's one of the earliest examples of a codified set of laws that actually provided guidelines for justice and behavior within a given society. So these codes were often intertwined with the religious beliefs of the time and the customs, and it reflects the values of the communities where that they were created in. That's a lot, isn't it? That's like
Yeah. So
crazy. Yeah.
so uh, I don't know what goes in, what, where my brain goes is is who was sitting around one day
Mm.
saying, "You know what we need? We need a code. We need who decided that? Do we know?"
So when I think historically and I think about ethics and I think about moral, I think a lot about ancient Greece. And really, this is where the formal study of ethics emerged. And it began with ancient Greek philosophers such as Socrates, Plato and Aristotle. And from a historical standpoint, Socrates was kind of the big guy. He was the first gun, right? And then
Mhm.
Plato was his student, and Aristotle was the student of Plato. And all three of them, even though they have different constructs in their philosophical ideologies, the three of them shift the focus from divine command, right, which was everything, right? You think about Greek mythology,
Right.
everything gods controlled humanity. So it shifts from this divine command to one of what they call rational inquiry, and about the nature of good and the best way to live your life. So Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle speak a lot about the goods of life and living your best life. And that philosophical revolution, it marks this transition from accepting moral principles based on faith to critically examining their logical foundation. Again, that's like
Okay.
a long time ago, right? That's that couple
Right,
thousand
right.
years ago. Yeah,
But it's from that. So,
it
so I'm,
is.
I'm just I'm thinking about the presentations we do and the
Mm,
conversations that we have with people about ethics and just teaching it. We talk about common morality and particular morality. That's
we
kind of
do.
where this is kind of where that piece comes from. Yeah.
And isn't that crazy to think that all everything we've talked about in the first 5 minutes here
Right.
is about moral code,
Yeah.
right? So we're going back to 1574 BCE to talk about moral code. And even the Greek philosophers talked about moral code. Even Hippocrates really speaks to moral code.
Right.
And, he's one of the earliest formalizations of an ethical code was the Hippocratic Oath. I don't know. You and I talk about
Yeah.
the Hippocratic Oath. We talk about that in our lectures. Um, and from a little historical construct, Hippocrates lived between about 460 BCE and 375 BCE. And actually, there's very little known about his actual life. And while he is credited with the Hippocratic Oath, there are many scholars who believed he probably, in fact, did not write it. It was not
Really?
un Yeah, it actually so it was not uncommon in these time periods, even if you go back to Socrates and Plato and Aristotle, that they didn't necessarily. I think Aristotle was one of the very first of all the philosophers that actually wrote his own thinking down. It wasn't just handed on verbally, but it wasn't uncommon that many of these people had scribes. So it
Okay.
probably wouldn't have been unrealistic to think of Hippocrates over the span of his lifetime in practicing medicine. So we all know that he's the father of medicine, right? He was considered the ideal physician, and he was revered for his ethical standards in medical practice. That he probably had multiple scribes that wrote everything down for him. So, is it possible that some of these philosophical ideologies or some of these teachings that were spoke verbally were written down differently or translated differently? Yes, absolutely. I think that's definitely a possibility. But if we think about just the Hippocratic Oath, it's probably one of the most or first formal moral code of ethics. It had three principles to it, and that was one of beneficence, right? You have to help your patient. It was non-maleficence, that avoiding harm. So we know that do no harm is part of the Hippocratic Oath, and it speaks to confidentiality. So protecting the confidential information of your patients from other people.
So beneficence, non-maleficence, did those terms come from the Hippocratic Oath? Is that when those terms came about? Like,
Um,
was that the beginning? I mean, obviously,
mhm,
this would be the beginning of the four pillars and the development
yes.
of that, but did these words what come from it?
So these words do come from this. They do. So do no harm, right, is non-maleficence. And that's exactly what
I mean, in the
Hippocrates
Latin
is
and
speaking
Greek,
to.
I get it, but
Yes.
as a label, not as necessarily a word.
No, I don't believe so. I
Okay.
believe, again, I'm going off. I am no expert in this, so I'm going off what I know, and I don't believe that's where the first use of these words came from. I think it was literally do not do harm, be of benefit, ensure confidentiality.
Although HIPAA
So
didn't
that
come
comes
about.
later, right? That didn't come until the 80s, if you think about it, right?
Right.
Now, is the Hippocratic Oath perfect in any way, shape, or form? Do you think it's perfect, a perfect code?
No, no.
Okay, I don't think it is either. And there are some limitations to it. So if you think about when this code was written, who did it refer to primarily?
It was physicians, right?
Physicians, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about the time of Hippocrates, there were no other there were no other medicine groups of
Mhm.
people. So it referred specifically to physicians. It did not emphasize the right of the patient. So there's no autonomy in the time of Hippocrates.
Right.
There's no definitive right of the patient within any of these codified standards. Patients did not have decision making at this time period.
So
And
whatever the
there's
doctor said was law.
That's correct.
And
That's correct.
so based off of that, if a doctor said this is what we're going to do, that's what we were going to do.
That's
Patient
correct.
didn't have a right to choose at that time, correct?
That's correct.
Right.
Yes. And the historical importance of the Hippocratic Oath is it actually sets the foundation for later medical ethics. Like we talked about
Gotcha.
beneficence,
Gotcha.
non-maleficence in being pillars. So this sets the stage for that later, those four pillars of biomedical ethics.
So let's jump ahead a little bit because I'm
Sure.
dying to get to the four pillars. Um, I'm going to say it this way. It's kind of silly. When did the four pillars become a thing?
So really, if the four pillars don't really become a thing, to be honest with you, the four pillars don't become a thing until the 1970s.
That blows my mind.
Doesn't that blow your mind? So in our time, like, so you and I were both born late 1960s. So within our lifespan,
Early
biomedical.
1970s, buddy. Settle down.
Oh, okay, sorry, I was born in the late 1960s. My apologies. My apologies.
No, you're good.
Is really we don't see a formal foundation of biomedical ethics until the 1970s. But before
Wow.
we get there, I think there's some things we need to talk about because
All
ethics
right.
before the 20th century, it's important that we have that conversation. It's also important that when we think about morals and how morals fit into the ethical structure, that there are religious and cultural traditions that frame out our particular and our moral, right?
Yeah, these were things that
Our
came from
moralities. Exactly.
like the Torah and the Old
Yeah.
Testament,
Yep.
right? Yeah.
So the Judeo-Christian values,
Right.
Islamic values, Hinduism, Buddhist
Mhm.
traditions, they really shaped the moral ideals of healing, suffering,
Gotcha.
human dignity, and moral responsibility. So medicine is historically guided by professional duty and
Mhm.
religious morality all rolled up into one. The real conversation of ethics really starts kind of in the late 19th century. And this is more around human subject testing, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Yep.
So, as we see in the 19th century, what do we see starting to become paramount? Anesthesia,
Right.
surgery, the importance of vaccination, right? And germ theory. All these start to take place in the late 19th century. And in this same time period, there's a lot of questions that go on about human experimentation because remember, there
Mhm.
was a lot of human experimentation that went
Right.
on during this time period. There was little to no consent,
Right. It was not necessarily
right?
regulated
It wasn't
human
regulated, correct?
experimentation. Right.
And then there's the one hand and the two hand of the risk versus benefit analysis.
Mhm.
So it really isn't until the end of World War II that we see a turning point in ethics. And again, we're going to keep talking specifically about human subject research.
Right. Okay.
And the reason for that, and it as uncomfortable as this next part of this conversation can be, it's an important part of our history. And it's important that we talk about that Nazi doctors performed
Mhm.
countless thousands of medical experiments on prisoners in concentration camps during the
Right.
Second World War. And these medical experiments were carried out in about a 3-year span between 1942 and 1945. And the literature tells us that there was probably over 15,750 victims
Wow.
of these experiments. There were probably more, and they were of various nationalities and ages. And
Now
about a
there,
quarter.
really
Go ahead.
quick,
Yeah.
there are documentaries that you guys can go watch.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name of the one in particular that talks about the experimentation at the concentration camps. They actually show the rooms where the experiments took place. Um, yeah, so I'm sorry, just that popped into
No,
my head.
it was bad, and it's important to know that about a quarter of these victims were killed
Oh yeah,
during these experimentations, and many of those that survived experienced severe permanent injuries. Now, many of you have likely heard, Mike, you've probably likely heard of the Nuremberg trials
right.
that occurred at the end of the Second World War. Well, there was a second part of the Nuremberg trials that were called the doctor trials. And
Oh,
when they were rounding up all, the Nazi party members, they rounded up
mhm.
all the Nazi party members that were physicians. And at Auschwitz and other camps, there were, again, immense amount of human experimentation that went on. And what the Nazis were trying to do was trying to figure out through human experimentation how they could best help their soldiers in combat situations.
Uh-huh.
They were seeking to develop new weapons, and they wanted to figure out if they could aid in the recovery of military personnel who had been injured. And obviously, they wanted to advance the Nazi racial ideology and eugenics.
Yeah, and part of that was
Um,
the trials that they did with methamphetamines,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
methamphetamines. They did human hypoxia trials.
Mhm.
They
Yep.
did anticoagulation studies. They did experimentation on neurosurgical procedures while people were awake.
Yeah.
And what I think is very disturbing when we think about this, and again, it's important that we have these conversations because, as uncomfortable as this might be, it's part of our history. These Nazi doctors, they defended their experimentation.
Hmm.
They argued that their procedures were justified, and they compared their victims to that of the collateral damage from Allied bombings.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's a disturbing
Not quite, but
that's a
okay.
disturbing sentence.
Yeah.
It's a disturbing sentence, right? And again, it was forced experiments, right? People weren't
Right.
told, "Oh, would you like to have your head cut open and us do?" No, they were forced experiments. Humans,
In many cases, they were lied to.
they were
They were
100%
lied
lied
to.
to.
They were
Yep.
told that they were gonna come in, they were gonna do this, but once they had them there and strapped down, they did this.
They did why. There
Yeah.
was extreme
Mhm.
suffering that was
Yeah.
involved by humans these victims, and there was no consent.
Right.
This time period changed ethics dramatically. It actually
Mhm.
revealed the dangers of the unchecked scientific authority. And
Wow.
naturally and appropriately, the world was angry, and there was a global reaction to this. And the world said, we need a codified set of standards in human testing. And so out of that came the Nuremberg Code of 1947. Now, the Nuremberg Code kind of gives us 4 principles. It says that individuals have to consent to human subjects trials, right? You have to say, yes, I want to do this.
So there's autonomy.
There's autonomy, right? You
Right.
have to avoid unnecessary suffering,
So
2.
there's do no harm.
Okay. You can withdraw at any time you want to. You can
And
say no.
that
There's
goes back to
autonomy,
autonomy, right?
autonomy,
Right?
and the research must benefit society,
So there's beneficence.
beneficence, and a
Yeah.
little bit of justice in
Uh-huh.
there,
Yep.
right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So this was the first leap into the world having an international research ethics code.
Wow. And so this was 1940s?
That was 1947,
Okay.
but there's still more because
Wow.
in 1964, the Declaration of Helsinki, which was put together by the World Medical Association, contributed the following 3 main aspects. And again, we're only talking about at this point in time human research
Right.
testing.
Right.
You had to have ethical standards to provide clinical research. You had to have independent review boards. So you couldn't just say, oh, we did this and we're going to do this. No, no, no. There had to be an independent body, unbiased, who was going to review your request and what it was you're going to do and the information you're going to gather. And you had to ensure that there was protection of vulnerable populations. So you couldn't just go out and target one population and say, well, we want to study this particular group of people.
Gotcha.
That's really not allowed. So this still influences medical research worldwide today.
Mm-hmm.
Now, while I'm on it, and I know I probably sound like I'm long-winded, but it's important that we understand something that went on. So while the Helsinki study was adopted in 1964, there's kind of a dark period of American medical public health research that, again, it's really needs to be discussed because it's part of the historical impact of where we are today. So, Mike, I know you and I have talked in the past about the Tuskegee Syphilis Study.
Right. Yes.
So that went on between 1932 and 1972. That's 40 years.
That's 40 years, yeah.
40 years. And again, this study was going on when I was born. And this study was actually conducted by U.S. Health Department officials.
Mm-hmm.
It was done so in Macon County, Alabama, at the Tuskegee Institute. This is why it was called the Tuskegee Study.
Right.
And what they did is they specifically took 600 impoverished African-American males. They told them they were going to vaccinate them, but instead they infected them with syphilis.
So they lied to them too.
That's correct. They lied to 600 impoverished African-American males, right?
Wow.
And what they did is their point was they wanted to study the progression of syphilis. And again, what was supposed to be a 6 to 9 month study that started in 1932 was a 40-year study. Okay.
Now,
and do you think it just impacted 600 men? No. Of course it didn't just impact 600 men.
Really quick, because I don't know a whole lot of history about syphilis. At what point, or do we even at this point have a treatment cure for syphilis?
So there's a treatment. Yes, there is a treatment. You can cure people of syphilis. You absolutely can. If it goes untreated, it becomes tertiary. Yeah.
When did that come about?
Correct me if I'm wrong. I want to say it was probably this might have been the 60s or the 70s.
Okay, so in the middle of this study,
yeah,
they developed a cure. Was that cure from this study?
I do not believe that was the case.
Okay,
no.
So this
because they purposefully denied these people treatment. So there was treatment available. It may not have been a cure, but there was treatment, right?
How do
they were purposefully denied?
How do you do that?
Well, this is what happens when you're not properly informing people and you want to specifically study the spread of syphilis amongst a specific group of people. So this is there's a lot of bad around this study, isn't there? This is ethics gone awry.
Yeah. So where you just said something I want to highlight. Was this study to look at how syphilis affects African Americans, or were they just using African Americans because of the time in this country that we were in to see how it affects people?
So they were specifically looking at the spread of syphilis in African American men.
All right. Or at least that's what they say.
At least that's what they said. Yes. At least that's what they say. Yes. So naturally, it didn't just affect the men. It did affect wives. It did affect children, right? So there was a longer lasting effect of this study in the fact that this was these people, not these people, these African-American men were misled, being told that they were going to be given vaccinations, and treatment was purposefully withheld. And they were not properly informed. They weren't told this is what we wanted to do and this is what we wanted to study, right? So, there's multiple ethical violations that go on here. So lack of consent.
Yeah. So I'm a little hung up on this. So let's be clear. This study began before the Nuremberg trial,
Yes.
before the
Yeah.
discovery decision, the realization that we need to have consent,
Yes.
but, continued well after that.
Yes. Actually, think about it. It continued on after the Declaration of Helsinki.
Yeah.
That the world, right, that everybody signed on to,
What
and
the
it
hell?
says that there has to be protection of vulnerable populations. You have to have ethical standards for clinical research, and there has to be independent review boards of this stuff. So none of that
None of
occurred.
that happened
None of that happened.
even after they decided it needed to happen.
Yeah, it went on until 1972, and the only reason it continued was in 1972, a journalist got wind of this and blew the whole can of worms wide open.
Thank God.
Yes. Yes.
Do we happen to know who that was off the top of our heads?
Um, I do not, but we
And for
can
the rest of
definitely
you,
come
that's
back to
code
it.
for
Yep.
Rob. Do you know who that was?
No, I was reading about it, and I can't think of what the author's name is now, and I apologize for that.
No,
But
let me.
she made herself quite famous
I gotta look
because
it
she
up. I gotta find
literally
out.
blew the lid off of this. So as you can imagine, the Tuskegee study really led to a deep mistrust in healthcare institutions and in the federal government when it came to
Good Lord.
healthcare.
Person who blew the lid off was Peter Buxton, whistleblower who worked
Yes.
as a venereal disease investigator for the U.S. Public Health Service.
Yes, but he wasn't the journalist.
Jean Heller.
That's her. Yes,
Jean
Jean.
Heller,
Yes, Jean Heller.
Associated
Thank you.
Press.
That's the name I was thinking of, and I didn't want to say because I didn't want to be wrong.
Oh, always be wrong. We'll correct it. It's 100%. Always risk that. We'll correct it after the fact. No big deal.
Well, that's why
We'll just overdub.
that's why
Jean
we have
Heller. Good job, Jean. My
Thank you,
God.
Jean. That's right. Thank you, Jean. So, Mike, your question was, well,
Yeah.
when do we hit the modern bioethical pillars?
Yeah.
Well, if you think about in the 1960s and 70s, there was a rapid advances, right, in medical
Yes.
technology, and this really created a lot of ethical questions. So, in the 60s and 70s, organ transplants start to go up. Dialysis becomes a thing. Life support technology becomes more and more and more and more advanced.
Right.
And we also start seeing a dip into the genetic sciences. So we see these emergences of the field of biomedical ethics, and it becomes this interdisciplinary framework between medicine and philosophy and law and theology and public policy. So now the focus starts to change on patient rights and decision making. So in 1979, actually, this is the same year, but before we talk about Beauchamp and Childress, the Belmont Report actually set the ball in motion for major U.S. ethics framework. And the Belmont Report was written by the National Commission for the Protection of Human Subjects of Biomedical and Behavioral Research. And again, there were three core principles. And let's start tying these together. Respect for persons,
Right.
beneficence, and justice. Right.
This was around the same time as the National Research Act, which was 1974, right?
Absolutely. That's correct.
Yeah.
So in the period of the 70s, we see a really huge leap forward in biomedical ethics.
And it's worth noting that a large part of this was due to Jean Heller publishing her article in the Associated Press.
I believe so. I believe that definitely had a lot to do with it.
What Claude told me.
Oh,
the report broke in. Yeah, Jean Heller's report in the Associated Press broke July 25th, 1972. And the study was shut down very shortly after that. And that led to the National Research Act and the Belmont Report.
All right. So if you think
according to Claude.
Okay, thank you, Claude. Yeah. Claude is our other podcast.
He's our resident researcher.
He's our resident researcher.
Yeah.
So now, if we think about all the things that we just talked about through history, we talk about moral code, we talked about religion, we talked about Hippocrates, we talked about really three pillars of biomedical ethical research, right? That came in a 40-year time span. The four principles of bioethics really hit the stage in 1979 when two authors, Tom Beauchamp and James Childress, write their first book. The first edition came out in 1979, and it was entitled The Principles of Biomedical Ethics. And what the authors proposed what they argued was that the four pillars are common morality, right? These are the
Right.
things that we can all agree to, right? These are
Mm-hmm.
the things that guide people in analyzing bioethical dilemmas. And we talk about the common moralities of those moral norms that we conduct ourselves as humans. These moral norms, they transcend our cultures, our religions, and our regions. Sound familiar?
Oh yeah.
Yes. And what are those common moralities? Well, we don't kill. We don't harm one another. We don't cause suffering to others. We don't steal. We don't punish the innocent. We're taught to be truthful. We're taught to obey the law. We're taught to nurture the young, independent, and we have a moral obligation to rescue those in danger.
So
So
tell me if
based on,
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
go ahead.
Tell me if I'm wrong. So
Mm,
you're talking specifically about common morality right now.
yes,
On the flip side of that, and we always talk about it being on the flip side, but it's actually not the flip side, is
it's
particular
not.
morality. Particular morality actually, based off of what I'm learning here, preceded common morality, correct? Because particular morality
Mhm.
was the social norms within that community.
Yes.
And so now, so it started as it went from the religious morality to particular morality to now common morality, right?
Yeah, and
That,
they're all
that's how this
and they're
progressed.
all integrated.
They are, but they're progressions of the previous,
Yes,
is what they are.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree that I think if we think of this as an ethical construct,
Hmm.
there is definitely, I think in my humble opinion, there's a progression,
Absolutely.
right? And again, more morality still remains at the heart of ethical decision making. And so when Childress and Beauchamp proposed the four pillars, they said that there was number one, autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, and justice.
Right.
And those are the four principles of biomedical ethics that, again, didn't become framework until 1979. Really not that long ago, if you think
Right.
about it,
No,
right?
totally. Sorry.
And so when we no, and we think about these four pillars. What was their
Mhm.
driving point? Well, their driving point was that number one, if you think about autonomy, right? Any notion of moral decision making assumes that rational agents are involved in making informed and voluntary decisions, right? Autonomy, it's the negative obligation not to interfere in choice. It's a positive obligation to provide appropriate information so informed decisions can be made.
Mhm.
And people are free to make their own decisions as long as they do not harm others. Right. And I know we talk a lot about Immanuel Kant, and we talk about, his 18th century philosophy of the rights of moral autonomy. But one of Kant's, ideologies within the construct of moral autonomy is a person
Right.
has a right to make their own decisions, but a patient doesn't have a right to harm another patient.
Yeah. So when we look at the four pillars,
Yep.
the four pillars are the tree trunk of ethics.
Ah, I love that. I love that.
They're the
That's a
tree
great
trunk of
analogy.
ethics. So
Yes.
because I look at it when you were talking about that, I look at it reverse, and I said we have all of these little things, right? So
Mhm.
informed consent is part of autonomy, right?
Mhm.
So everything comes back down to these four pillars. So the four pillars become the foundation within which everything else that is ethical fits. So everything that we talk about is going to fit into one or more of these four pillars. That's
Yes.
that's that's the
Yes.
that's where I came up with the tree trunk analogy. That was
Yeah,
me, not
I love
by the
that. That's a great
way.
analogy. No, that's an
Yeah.
excellent analogy. And I think people are bright enough to know that, beneficence is ensuring that what we're doing for our patients is of
Mhm.
benefit. And it also has to be what the patient decides they want. Non-maleficence,
Right.
right? Do no harm. That's an obvious thing to say. Where I think the pillars become the most confusing is that justice. And I know even Mike, when you and I talk about
Yep.
ethics,
We separate them.
we spend a little bit more time talking about justice, because I think people do think justice means the justice system,
Right.
but that's not what it is. In this construct, it really is all persons being treated with equal respect. And
Fairly.
actually, it was Aristotle who said that giving to each that which is his due. Okay,
Mm.
fairness.
Yep. There you
And
go.
specifically in the construct, what Beauchamp and Childress were talking about was distributive justice. Who gets treatment when there's a shortage? Okay. And they go on and they actually say in their textbook, they say, in fact, in our society, it uses a varieties of factors as criteria for distributive justice.
Hmm.
And the authors say that this includes the following, right? They say to each person an equal share according to need,
Yep.
to each person according to effort, to each person according to contribution, to each person according to merit, and to each person according to the free market exchanges.
Right.
And I know that can be a very, I think of the four pillars, that likely is the most troubling or difficult for people to wrap their head around, because that
Yeah.
term justice says a lot.
Well, I think it's also one that, while you and I might think it's clear, it may not be as crystal clear to
Mm.
a layperson.
It's murky.
Where beneficence has the word benefit in it.
Yep.
You know, you know what I mean? Non-maleficence, if you
Yeah.
translate that into do no harm, they go, got it. You
Yep.
know, autonomy, people understand that's I get to choose, my right to choose.
Mhm.
Those become easy to understand. I think justice, and you're right, it's because we don't think of justice having a definition, which is to treat others fairly. We
Right.
don't think of it in terms of having a definition. We think of it in terms of a system, judicial system,
Correct.
not justice in practice in a bioethics state. Yeah,
Yes.
or
Yeah.
bioethics.
And I do believe that's likely the most challenging
Yeah,
of the four
and that's
pillars.
probably why.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. So, I mean, these are the four principles, that these are the foundation of our modern clinical ethics.
that's amazing.
Isn't that amazing?
What
Mm.
still what blows me away constantly and still just totally completely trips me out is that the common day bioethics that we consider, that we deal with, that we practice, that we preach, when we learn about, is 80 years old. 80 years.
No, if you think about the four pillars starting in 1979, it's not
Well,
not even 80
okay.
years old, right?
It's so I so so
It's
so
not even
40 years
80
old,
years old. It's 40
right?
years old.
So
Yeah.
40 years old,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
But that makes it even worse, right? When you correct
Yes.
my math.
Sorry.
No, that's all right. But that's my thing is, we we needed to go back. We need to remember where these things come from.
We do.
We need to keep that stuff in mind, because in another 40 years, where are we going to be? In another 2000 years, right?
Yes.
Where are we going to be? What will we have learned at that point?
Mm.
What will we have discovered we're doing wrong now and had to add to or adjust course on what we're doing? You know what I mean? That's the stuff that
Do.
blows my mind. Is, and in respiratory, I think of something is, as trivial as nitric, right?
Mhm.
Nitric's only been around since the 90s.
Yep.
FDA approved in 98.
Yep.
But it's just it's nitric.
Yep.
No, when we went to school, nitric didn't exist.
No.
When we went to our respiratory programs, nitric was in studies to determine whether or not it was something. So it's that kind of thing that amazes me, on how new a lot of these things that we think are just common sense,
Mhm.
how new that common sense actually is.
Yes.
Right? That kind
Yes.
of blows my mind. And I'm
And
still, Rob and I have talked about this for probably the last year, long before we did this episode, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it.
Because it is an enormous monstrosity, and we've talked
Yeah.
about that, right? We've talked about that the topic of ethics is not a tiny little grain of sand. The topic of
No.
ethics is wider than the Grand Canyon. It's
Yeah.
longer than the Grand Canyon. It's deeper than the oceans.
Yeah.
And we talk a lot about how our common morality, our particular morality, our
Mhm.
religious values, who we are, really all those morals shape our ethical standards, and it shapes our
100%.
focus on how we look at things. And there's no doubt that there are new technological ethical challenges, I think, right along. um, the next chapter, how is AI going to affect
Oh, yeah.
healthcare, and how is AI going to affect ethical decision making
Mhm.
when it comes to our patients, when it comes to moral autonomy, when it comes to every aspect of it. So I think we're, to your point, Mike, like we are entering a period of time of uncharted waters. And what will the next 40, 50 years look like in
Mhm.
biomedical ethics? And will there be changes?
And I think to your point right there, if I can sound super corny, every tomorrow is in effect uncharted waters. And that's what I'm trying to wrap my head around.
Yes.
We practice based off current things, current standards, current ethics, uh, current available resource. But what's going to be there tomorrow? Where is that? And I think a lot of times looking toward that requires looking back, right? At the same time.
Yes.
And ethics
Yes.
is one of those great examples. So when you guys sit around and I'm sure somewhere somebody is wondering why ethics? This is
Hmm.
why, right?
Yes.
Because ethics is relatively new as far as we look at it and consider it based off those four pillars today. Although ethics has been around for
Thousands
centuries.
of years,
Yeah, thousands of
right?
thousands of years.
Thousands of years it's been around. Yeah.
And
So
and
it,
so
it is.
that's super interesting to me. I can't get around it. I'm
Well, I'm
trying.
glad. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. It was a
No,
lot
I
of
really did.
fun
Thank you,
to
Rob.
walk down the history pathway. I wanted to remind you, Mike, don't forget to put up,
Oh,
like, share,
I don't forget
follow.
to like and subscribe. It'll go right up here somewhere.
Ready? Three,
Um,
two,
and
one. Maybe not.
oh, what?
I said, ready? Three, two, one.
It goes up in post. Relax.
Got it's fine.
Um,
It's all good.
that goes up in post, but this doesn't go up in post. So right down here, right? Remembering to email us, right? Let's get ethical podcast at gmail.com. You have episode ideas, guests. You have something you didn't feel like commenting, but always make sure you comment below. We love to have these conversations. We're all about it. And every conversation is ethical. You'll find
Every single
every
one.
conversation is about ethics in some way, shape, or form.
Everyone.
Um, and I dare anybody to challenge us on that. Have a conversation with us and ask us where ethics fits. We'll tell you. It
We'd
fits
love
in
that.
every single conversation. It's amazing. And it's something you don't always realize, don't always think about. But Rob, thank you so much. You are who I go
My
to
pleasure.
for these. And as always, I've learned. I learned something new today, and I really
Excellent.
appreciate it. It's really awesome.
So it's
Um,
been my absolute pleasure
so
today
why don't you go ahead
teaching
and take us out
you.
when you're done?
I certainly will. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and join us next time on Let's Get Ethical.